see a lot of familiar faces here. I know that a couple of guys here have joined Startup Launchpad. We got some VCs here, and very much IoT related. And I think that's pretty cool. Today we've got quite a very relevant group of people that can share kind of their experiences. But before I get started with questions, can I ask how many people in the crowd are startups? Investors? If you're a startup, there are only 2. And how about service providers? Great. So I'm sure our panelists here today are pretty global. I would say they all have a pretty good sense of Western startups here in Asia. And before we really kick it off with questions, I want to see how many people already have questions they want to ask. All right, you're making my job tougher. Okay, so let me just kick it off. The first question I wanted to ask, again, as I mentioned before, you guys get a good sense of American startups here. And the Hong Kong ecosystem really kicked off, and there's momentum. And being in the IoT hardware industry, I'd like to kind of get you guys to share a bit about what's the biggest difference between a Western startup and a startup coming from Asia. What are they lacking? What do they have as strengths? Why don't we start off with William here?
Okay. The experience I actually see so far coming from last year is the things I saw actually coming from the accelerator programs. And there are lots of the startup coming from other world. Starting, I think, last year, November, I see they are mostly utilizing machine learning, that kind of the advanced intelligence to the solutions, which is, unfortunately, when I look into the local startup here, they are kind of not yet ready. However, there is a different way to look at the machine learning, the development stages, because one of the things is what exactly the machine learning, the people, the skill set that we are looking into for the industrial is actually, is it really a data scientist or a programmer? In general, it's a data scientist, not only a programmer. That is how we are lacking off. That's why when we try to lift up the community in Hong Kong, we work with some of the startup and university to enable some of the skill set from the data scientists. And also one of the partners that we try to do is one of the big 4. We also think that is something we are a little bit lag behind in general from the local startup.
Great. And Francis, you guys see startups, you guys start out in the US, and then now you guys are here in Hong Kong. You have kind of 2 kind of case studies already that you're seeing. What are the differences, pros and cons of both sides that you're seeing?
Well, I cannot give you time to talk too much about the US side because I've only been there for a few months, but let me answer it slightly differently. Before I came to Hong Kong, I thought that maybe the startups in Hong Kong would be less innovative and more following the traditional product line. And guess what? It's a surprise to me. The startups that we accepted into the lab has a lot of innovation in terms of product ideas and the product that they are making, which I never thought of. I've never could thought about that it could be coming from Hong Kong. One of probably the biggest difference I see is that the US startups tend to really focus on the design and the application side of it, and they will probably need some help in terms of manufacturing and sourcing and productization of their idea eventually, meaning that they need to come to China. And a lot of the devices and product startups in Hong Kong, in some level, they already know what it is like producing a product. And they have some understanding of productization and manufacturing and the issues associated with them. They're more ready to handle that kind of thing. So that's probably the major differences that I can see right now.
Thank you. And Greg, coming from a manufacturing point of view, what are the differences that you see?
Well, really, I'd say the hardware massive hat that I wear gives me a lot more insight, which, I've had a great opportunity. We've traveled through Tokyo, Osaka, and Seoul, and we've started chapters in Poland, Barcelona, and throughout the U.S. a little bit. And as we've been connecting with this community, what I've seen is that every city has its own culture. And there's basically, I'd say the first kind of defining aspect is the maturity of the community. It starts with makers everywhere, all the time. Hardware startups kind of start with the maker community, and then those makers turn into entrepreneurs, and then those entrepreneurs get together, and then service providers come around to service those communities. Those service providers then get together, and you see the very developed form of this in the Bay Area, right? It's I'd say Hong Kong. Most of the communities around the world are probably about where San Francisco was about 4 years ago, where there were some $1 million crowdfunding campaigns. There were service providers. There's events happening once a week where people get together. And there's a lot of learning, and there's a lot of sharing of knowledge that helps everybody, and really, even if you don't know about manufacturing, you're kind of getting going on a little bit of an easier platform, because a lot of people are around there to share their experiences. So, so there's kind of the maturity of the community in general, I'd say is the first aspect. And then there's a very individual cultural aspect, which is, Japan is very focused on the technology, and our first meetup there, we had a guy who had a video of a drone flying a person that he built like in his garage, basically. It's like, wow, just amazing stuff. But in networking session, everybody sat in their chair and didn't talk to anyone for a half hour. We were like, what's going on? We need to spike the drinks or something. So it's very much community focused, I think, and what is that cultural experience? In Hong Kong, I think people are a bit more business focused, and there is a bit more drive on that business plan. But you can't really say in the U.S., I think, because if you go to Ohio, it'll be much different than San Francisco. Even San Diego to San Francisco, San Diego is 3 or 4 years behind where San Francisco is.
I swear this is not planned, but I just realized that we're kind of going in order of a startup's journey, and we got a software provider, we got the cloud service, we got an accelerator, we got manufacturing, and now we're going to come with distribution. And wearing the global sources hat, I think one of the things that we see in China, very good at manufacturing, right? They know how to control costs, and they're able to control the margins that are very important when it comes to distribution. And then when we look at, because Global Sources also looks at investments in early stage startups, I think that when we look at Western startups, they come in and they really do solve the problem. They focus on design and software. But when we start looking at the margins built on the product, where the distributor or retailer needs to make their own fundamental profit and margin built into their current distribution channels, it's lacking. I'll give you an example. We had a product that came in, MSRP was $200, but their bill of material was $120. You have to make your own money to cover your own costs, and you also need to be able to distribute margins for your distributor and your retailer. So it's something that I think as a startup, you kind of have to work backwards sometimes and look at the fundamentals of your distribution channels, your price, your marketing, your supply chain, even your packaging and your pipeline of products. Because in retail, I think what you start seeing is that you don't just buy one product for 2-3 years. You need to have new iterations of products, for Christmas, for spring, whenever the big peak season for sales are. Okay, next question. I think when it comes to IoT, one of the things that's I feel, or what we're witnessing, is that there's a lot of noise with solution providers. When it comes to connection, there's always the Wi-Fi, there's the Bluetooth, there's Zigbee, Z-Wave, Apple HomeKit. There's so much out there. What does it take, for it to actually become a true ecosystem? Is it that all these startups have to stick onto one protocol, or can everyone live with several protocols? What are you guys seeing in the market?
Well, from the software perspective, we see the open source will continue to evolve, but definitely, 2 years ago, Qualcomm brought up the all-join protocol, which is ideally is bring all the connections to be all over using the same HTTP protocol, basically. This hasn't been really going well so far, and the industry will still need some more time to integrate. And I think the currently is not important about how the protocol onto the device size to interact with your sensor, because you can have a sensor which is a 35, but whatever can have a very decent Bluetooth low energy protocol, or even with a Wi-Fi connection. So I think the protocol hasn't been really so important for now. The important from the overall point of view is how to make your device or the services become a much more bigger usage in terms of how the overall service to be delivered in general, I think. So I don't think for a startup shouldn't be spending too much time to look into a single or one or two protocol in terms of on your device how to interface with another device, as long as you come up with your skill set and majority of the protocol which is pretty much stable and pretty much lots of people are using it. Yes.
Great. Francis?
I pretty much agree with William. I think from a wearable devices design point of view, the user scenario, the user experience, and solving the user problem should be the startup's primary focus. In terms of technology and protocols between the chipset, the sensor, yeah, that's an engineering problem, but for the startup level, other than if the protocol or the technology is not causing a huge cost problem or a huge cost reduction issue, or even a technology or a technical issue, I think they should be really focused on solving the consumer, the user problem. Having said that, it doesn't mean that we should have a lot of segmentations, because in the history of technology, we see that segmentation doesn't help at all. Openness too. So I think at this stage of the IoT industry, we will still see a lot of drivers whom are strong enterprises, enterprises that are coming from the technology world, or from the consumer product or from the product world, creating their own platforms and technologies. But eventually, I think as products get more popular and the market will kind of evolve into an open direction. That's my personal take.
Great, thank you. Greg?
Yeah, I agree. I won't rehash it, but yeah, I think definitely there are protocols. If you can solve a customer need and you can sell it at a price point that makes sense, you can have a successful business. That being said, it's all changing very fast. So the technology behind your business, when you decide on the optimal protocol or chipset or what have you, go. Right? You got to move fast. You got to be ready to develop your product around that, because it's a short-term game. It's only going to last 1, 2, 3, 4 years. So you've got to really make the most of it out of that short period of time. And I'll also just throw this in. I met a guy last week who claims that their company will be providing gigabyte speed connectivity basically to anywhere, totally secure. It's a magic wand kind of solution. It sounds too good to be true, so that's where I'm going to leave it. But he also had the support of a VC who is reinventing the internet, who understands the stuff probably better than anybody else. So there's definitely some legitimacy to that. But I would, so the caveat I would say is that this technology is going to change fast. And so when you build your business plan, when you build your product, make sure that you build it with a timeline in mind that it's going to make your business work, because it's only probably going to really work for a few years. The concept might work and the value might work, and focus on that and the brand, and be adaptable to the changing protocols.
Great. Okay. I'll ask a couple more questions, and hopefully by now you guys have a couple questions in mind. But one of the things that we see right now in IoT hardware, hardware as we know it, if you're just a hardware product, can be copied overnight. Having been be part of Hong Kong and being just right next to Shenzhen, hardware is easily copied. And so IoT starts going there with algorithms data collection, and all this, and all these buzzwords. Artificial intelligence is another buzzword that we constantly hear. And now a lot of the startups pitch, and they're saying, yeah, we're going to monetize data, right? We're collecting so much data. We have so many hours of data collection. How real is that? And if it is real, what are some of the success stories that you've seen in the market? Francis, how about we go to you?
I was just not thinking, and then hit. Put it this way: it's IoT. If without the connection, without the internet, it's just the thing. It's Internet of Things. So by definition, I think it only makes sense that you create value not just from the hardware, and in fact, in the long term, you need to create value over the internet, the usage of the connectivities. And what does that mean? Of course, is generating the data. And big data, everybody talks about big data today. It's not just collecting the data, probably. It's the value that after you collect the data, what kind of value that you could create with the data, creating new business models with the data and all that. We just talked about, in my talk, we just talked about that there's a trend that consumer needs a more accuracy on their wristbands. And they're not just satisfying with a rough counting of your steps, a rough counting of your calories and things like that. They want more accuracy. So having that data collected and then making it accurate, filtering it, that's at least, for just taking an example, is a value add on the data side, on the soft side, on the software side. So I would say I don't really have a formula to success, or this will fail or this will success. But I can just say that if a smart device, a device that is under leverage of the internet, of the fact that you're generating data and processing data, and neglect to add value or to create some, or to spend your energy and thinking about the back end, it would probably lose out in a while because it's just a hardware product. Then it's subject to the kind of risk that you just mentioned about being copied, and you force yourself to compete on the price and volume space, which is sometimes not a very comfortable zone to be in.
How about you, Greg?
Yeah, I guess general formula. Obviously IoT is going to change our world in big ways. I think what maybe a misconception or misdirection from a lot of startups is that we all get caught up in the hype, right? I mean, how many activity trackers are there, and how many are going to be successful as companies, right? A small handful. That's a very small percentage, but this is what the media talks about because this is where there's a lot of movement and it makes a great story. So, it's almost like you really need to read the news and look at what everyone's excited about it and ignore that and don't touch it. Right? There's going to be too much competition. It's going to be all the stuff that people aren't talking about that is going to really change the world. And smart home, you're home a lot and there's some value there, but how much can you do with temperature control? I've never had a real problem with the temperature of my house. Do I need a $200 thing to tell me I'm hot? Probably not. So I think there's a lot of misdirections of things, and some of them will be useful, and there'll be some products that come out of those, but it's going to be the products that nobody's thinking about that are really going to last, I think, and make the money. And I'll give you an example. We manufactured a product for it's the first IoT game, real live action game, and also the first throwing live action game. So you guys know foosball? It's right over there, the soccer playable live action game. This is a cricket, so the bowler throws a ball, but it's connected to the internet, and you can measure the games played, and you can compete globally, and you can get better, and it can measure your stats, and you can log in at a bar or whatever else. It's kind of a simple IoT sort of solution, but it's one that's pretty valuable. People that really get into this game, they want to record their scores, they want to get better, they want to compete with people, and so I think there's going to be a lot of simple solutions, but it's going to be in these unique value propositions that are really going to be the better long-term play, where there's not so much crazy competition.
Yeah, that's interesting because, as you mentioned, there's a lot. When you're in hardware, there's a lot of people that do similar things. And every time we think we see something new, someone else is doing it somewhere else. And I think generally we see a lot of startups. You start up as risk takers. You're an entrepreneur, but as you get into the business, you become less, and less. You have a less appetite for risk, it seems. And we find a lot of startups that, especially in their hardware, they hold back on distribution. Or they hold back because they don't think they're ready. And I think one of the key factors is you just got to get in the market and take over that market share, and then adjust as you go. But anyway, back to William. What do you see?
I think I see three things from the data usage. First, interesting is I don't see the startup really collecting data. Majority not really collecting data. This is from my point of view. Secondary, if you look into the data collections, of course, there are lots of insight you can see exactly from my presentations. I think it's a startup's responsibility to protect the data and how the usage being used, the user has to be fully understood. And second point and the third point I'd like to bring up is it's not the data you are collecting and how you can use it, is whether you can combine your data with other open source data will create much more variable. Last year, I saw a startup, they are creating a smart parking. And basically, they utilize the government, some sort of data. As you know, some of the UK and other countries, they are very advanced. They have published some sort of the government data, which you can, on open API, you can access it. In Hong Kong here, the data is pretty raw. Actually, the government hasn't been doing a good job yet. And one thing that frustrates with the startup is when they try to use the open source of data, they cannot use their solution into a commercial world. So which means when we look into that, we try to work out with the Invest Hong Kong, with some of the regulatory, and also try to embrace it out the open source, with working with the science technology part together, how to get some of the things to be fully adopted from the start. Because as I said, the value is not only the data you collect, the value is your data combined with all the open source data. And the last thing which is also coming interesting is, even though you got your data, how to protect your data in terms of integrity. For example, if your data using is a medical use, and as you see, everyone, you have the patient and you go to the doctor, your records not being shared. And one of the interesting I see is last year there are a noise coming from fintech, is coming from blockchain. And initially it's pretty much shaking the fintech society. But however, there's an IoT being actually hooked up or actually being related to the blockchain technology because due to the integrity of the technology. So that's things we will see. Three things will be evolving. First is collecting your data. Secondary, we will try to work with the local regulatories, whether you can utilize the open source data combined with the usage to provide better service. And the third thing is what is the best technology to protect the integrity of technology. For example, whether blockchain will be something really everybody looking into, so maybe we would like to see.
Thank you. I'll ask one more question and we'll open it up to the floor. This is probably, most people fall to this. When apps came out on your mobile phone, you kind of don't read the terms and conditions and you kind of go, yeah, sure, I'll download that. And then now, when I leave for, when I know I have a trip or I have a scheduled meeting, suddenly they go, Ben, you should leave now because traffic's really bad. And you're going, where the hell did this come from, right? It leads to kind of what you touched on a little bit, William. Policies on data collection and the integrity of what is collected, and then there's always a risk of your data being exposed. Do you see or do you predict that government bodies will be taking a larger stance on what data is being collected, and would it be detrimental to IoT? Why don't we start with William?
Very much depending on the wearable segment. For example, for those data being collected, usually you have to play some sort of the big data. Financial segment, very low, very slow, and medical service, slow. But the medical service is pretty advanced in United States, whatever. So I guess is the overall, the individual country and regulatory, whether they are moving forward or not. From my point of view, I see Singapore somehow a little bit faster than Hong Kong, but I know the Hong Kong government, the people, they are looking into this one. So it's something beyond the vendor, like we are from the vendors, we need to work with some of the other big players, which is coming from the voice from the start, and then work to the industrial, and back to the voice feedback to the government. So I think it's not a immediate answer I can provide, but something we need to work into together.
How about Greg? What are you seeing in the U.S.?
Well, I think what we're seeing now is not. What I see is the big and I don't want to say winning exactly because I think it's kind of a win-win for everybody right now. But yeah, the terms and conditions are 20 pages long and nobody's going to read them. And there's really our legal system is set up in a way that we can't. There's going to be no way to change that in a feasible way. And the other thing is a 9-year-old with 2 cameras in 5 years is going to be able to walk around and be able to identify every living person by name just by capturing their videos. So I think the technology is going to be so good that the data will be able to be captured so easily, right? We can, and having access to the database, I mean, you can create your own database just by walking around with a couple cameras. So the technology is going to be so far ahead that there's going to be no way to prevent people from capturing and using that. So the only way I think that could be done is on the other side is how do you use that data, right? Are there limitations on what people can use once they know who you are? And my feeling is that it's probably going to help our world a lot more than it hurts. So everyone is going to continue to sign those 20-page agreements without looking at them, and we're going to get advertisements that are really focused on who we are, and it's going to be a good thing, I think in a lot of ways. But it is a very scary thing because it's not just going to be the cameras feeding back to a system. It's going to be the door is going to know who you are and react to who you are, and the ceiling and every non-living thing around you is now going to know who you are and react to who you are as an individual person, and it's going to get pretty wild.
I see more and more people with laptops and they got masking tape over the camera, just afraid of being tapped into. And it reminds me of a story, I forget which European country, but they passed a law where parents cannot shoot videos of their kids without their consent and put it publicly. So, the government is trying to take baby steps, we'll see. What about you, Francis? What do you see?
Well, trying to look at it from a philosophical way, I guess I'm not technical enough to comment too much on that, right? And if you look back, before the age of the smartphone, there's no way for anybody to track your location and your behavior, your conversations, your email, everything like that, right? So email only comes to your desktop computer, it doesn't come to your phone, but now they do. So if you think back, like, how do we deal with them? I think we are just having the similar problem in a much bigger scale, but the nature of the problem is the same. So government probably will react to it, new regulations will form, new technology will enabling the sharing, the more technology that will enable more sharing of data, there will be equivalent technology to come up to help implement protections. And on the other hand, the user will also learn how to protect themselves as well. So like taking the camera off your, I haven't done that yet, but that's something I learned today as well. So I guess it is a problem that draws a lot of concern, but I would not think of it as a showstopper. But rather think of it as that it's coming. Let's deal with it from different angles, and of course, like you say, governments need to start involved, technology vendors, and users like us as well.
Good, thank you. Does anyone in the crowd have a question? Yes?
So Francis, you stayed in China for a little bit, right? For a long time, you said.
Yeah, sometime.
You also mentioned when Internet of Things without Internet is just thing. And obviously, in China, there's a lot of restriction for the Internet. Even Google or Microsoft is part of the Android market. Do you have any recommendations for startup about how should they deal with this?
Well, good question. I lived in China through the age of when Google was there, and then suddenly Google was not anymore. Well, not suddenly, gradually it disappeared. I mean the service, right? Google is still in China. But if you look at it, a lot of opportunity had service as a result of that, right? If Google was still operating in China, there would be no Baidu today. Maybe Baidu is not as big as today. If Facebook is operating in China, then WeChat, I don't know whether WeChat will have a chance. So the market actually will fix itself because there's always a demand there. And yeah, the startups are worried about, I think, one of the most concerned issues is copycat, right? So, well, what if my idea is copied in China and launched in China before I do, something. So my answer to that is, I think Ben had touched upon it too. Whatever innovations you can come up with, there's probably always another individual on this planet who thought about the same thing. So innovation is not necessarily unique, but you need to deal with it. So there are people who at least from the investment, some of the investors I know would like to look into China innovation, and when they see something, they will see if the US has a similar startup or similar project that is already going on. And interestingly, they will try to link up the two. And create a common interest. So you focus in China, you focus in the US, and maybe someday you can be like one technology, one product globally. So I don't know if I answered your question or not, but China definitely is different in some way, but yet the same, right? So the nature of people using the internet, the nature that the regular consumer requires, what the services are pretty similar. So I don't know who copies from who, but as the two markets evolve, the more they are different, it feels different, but the more to me it look the same as well. So there are lessons learned from or ideas we can capture from either side.
And actually, if you don't mind, I have a couple of comments. Actually, China do not block anything about Internet of Things. China's only blocks you to go onto some specific service, maybe associated going to the traffic in Taiwan or Apple Daily or Facebook. Anything what we call about Internet of Things, sometimes we call is connected device. Basically, it's not really talking about Internet. It's something on the device, on the sensors, able to have connectivity to the back end, to able to utilize the data to build the intelligence. So that is something we call Internet of Things. So that is something that maybe we shouldn't look into the China, the Beijing firewall blocking some of the service, totally irrelevant. And from Microsoft point of view, we have tons of the startup in China doing Internet of Things and in Taiwan as well. So definitely there's nothing stopping you to do Internet of Things in terms of even in China.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that everyone that goes to the Chinese market needs to be careful. If I can give one piece of advice, is when you get to a stage where you want to get into the Chinese market, whoever you work with, obviously there's relationship built into it, but a long-term relationship. Always think long-term relationship. And that means that your terms that you have with your distributor, don't call it a 6-month relationship. Try to extend it so that you do not get replaced by something else. That's something that we always look at when we're a service provider getting into China, especially when we work with SOEs. State-owned enterprises. You don't want a 1-year term because in 1 year they can really collect a lot of information about you and try to replace you. And if you get a 5-year term, you protect yourself a little longer. Yeah. Any other questions? Max.
San Francisco is a great ecosystem, right, for companies and investors and startups. So these are very important for innovation. There are other big, ecosystems in the world. London is great. There are others coming up. I think Hong Kong is into that trajectory. It's probably a bit behind that. But I was wondering, based on your experience, what Hong Kong should do to become a more efficient ecosystem for innovation itself?
Well, exactly. That's one thing the Hong Kong government is looking into. That's why if you look into the financial report beginning of this year, Hong Kong government specifically looking into few things. First is initially they focus into the IoT. The reason why is, given all the innovation from the start of technology, Hong Kong still have the manufacturing in terms of protecting the patents and then close to the Shenzhen factories. So which is one thing is uniquely from the positioning point of view, Hong Kong government want to attract more startups coming to here. That's why Invest Hong Kong and the other, or even the Startup Festival, try to do all the work here. And secondary is, beyond IoT technology, there are many startups doing many different types of technology. One of the things is the financial fintech. Because being a financial hub in Hong Kong here, the government know this is a critical. So that's why they can also lay out this from the financial report, how to enable some of the fintech technology and putting mass amount of money to help the startup. For example, having startup port and HKMA, all the other to look into that and render, including ourselves, IBM, our partners to do that. So I don't think you can look into the start to do every part of the technology, but if you look into, thank you, if you look into the fintech and the IoT, this is specifically put under the Hong Kong government, the financial report. So that is two things. If you're a startup, look into these two, and definitely if you look at, and another last thing I want to comment is, interestingly, the startup never locate one single city. Majority of startups that we come from other countries, they actually were willing to put one or two persons in the one single country and then look for a market beyond that country. So no matter whether your startup is coming from San Francisco or something from, we have plenty of startups actually from Europe, Germany, whatever, actually come to Hong Kong and then they establish the business here. So I think you don't need to look into the country boundary. Look at how mature your solution, how quickly you can penetrate the market, and then what will be the market and target, for example, fintech, IoT, what will be the advantages here. So look into that combination, you will potentially know where you start from your basement.
Greg?
Yeah, sure. I would, clearly they just need to put all their money into Hardware Massive and solve all the problems, right? No, but I mean, I jest a little bit, but this is why we created Hardware Massive, is because if you're looking at hardware specifically, then it's really about the lessons learned, right? Versus software, there's so many levels of expertise that you need to understand. Tooling, packaging, marketing, sales, distribution channels, all of these things, and for a small team to do that is very, very hard. So if you really want to support the hardware startup ecosystem, it's really about getting the whole ecosystem together and learning from each other so that you don't have to reinvent that wheel. And that's why that's why startups go to San Francisco, and that attracts those startups, because they have that ecosystem, and it's this loop that really builds up, right? And so having the events, having places like this where people get together and share that information is super, super important. But also I'd say just, invest in the things that you're good at too, right? And Hong Kong is international, right? So you have some strengths. There's the financial sector, there's these other things. So, putting the money, just like any business, you want to focus on your strengths a lot more than your weaknesses and really try to build those up.
I feel that Hong Kong has a great foundation, right? I mean, it's literally 45 minutes and you go over to Shenzhen. But for some reason, there's still a gap. There doesn't seem to be a huge marriage between Hong Kong and China. And maybe it's political, maybe it's something else. But a lot of noise says that we need to be connected to China because there's a nice IoT ecosystem here. You can do the R&D here, you can do the hardware manufacturing in Shenzhen. But still, I spent 50% of my time in Shenzhen. I'm going, hey, are you seeing Hong Kong startups come in and manufacture? They're saying no. There's not that much, and we're starting to see it happen. With Vertically Sourcing Group, we have their staff come down here and going back. I saw, we have NextPack here, and they're actively, bridging that gap. But still, no one's really taking advantage of that. It's literally 45 minutes, and you're over there, and you get connected with a huge manufacturing hub, and one of the best in the world. And if you do it correctly, you can really scale very quickly. So I still see that big gap. Right? Any other questions? Maybe we have time for one more? Yeah? Please.
When you started, how do you handle sales, let's say, products or settlements? You don't have any sales guys. How do you start from the
So how do startups handle the
Yeah,
sales channel?
let me say it again. I wonder how you handle if you're a young startup, you have nice products, but you still need to get into the shop somewhere, you need to sell online maybe. How are normal startups in San Francisco doing it?
Do you mean sales channel or marketing?
The sales itself, not the distribution, but you mean in the beginning you don't have much contact.
I can tell you very simply, they're doing it very poorly. This is the #1 problem all startups face, and definitely San Francisco. This is where it hasn't evolved to a good enough level yet. This is where they're at right now, and actually to that point, we just came out with we're going to release a 12 series podcast where we interviewed 12 of the top leaders in America, Brookstone, Amazon, these guys about startups getting into the market. And so check out Hardware Massive. We'll answer that question a whole lot better very soon. But fundamentally, startups are not nearly focused on the sales part of that business. And this is where Startup Launchpad is just an amazing resource, I think, because you get, I guess how to do it right is you got to get that feedback from those buyers, right? The buyers are the key holders to everything. And they will tell you what's wrong with your product. They'll tell you the right price point. They'll tell you the right distribution channel. They'll help you rebrand, marketing support, all of these things. And these are things startups, even in San Francisco, still are not focused on and don't understand very well. So the good ones are getting out there, and they're really spending a lot of time and energy and respecting the difficulty of that part of the equation. And those are the ones that are finding the big success. But you know, it's still a very small percentage of the startups that have a lot of great ideas and are getting great crowdfunding results, and you know, they're getting almost there. But you know, you look at Coolest Cooler, right? Biggest Kickstarter campaign ever goes under because they didn't have the numbers ready for retail, and they didn't know how to sell the product afterwards.
To reiterate Startup Launchpad, it's a great place. But I think I do this talk a lot about identifying your sales channel. And I mentioned it briefly before. There are 5 things that you need to get in place before you consider distribution. One is pricing. I'll be very much based on that. Second is marketing. Right? And it's not just your website, how you position your product. It's in-store marketing. And why in-store marketing? It's because most of the products that we have in the startup arena is that they're most likely very early in the product adoption stage, which means that you're trying to tap into the early mass and the mass. So how do you communicate in a store what your product is? So a distributor or a retailer will say there's a 6-foot roll and there's a 3-foot roll. From 6 feet away, when I look at your product, do I get captivated? And by the time I get to 3 feet, can I convert, right? So in-store marketing is the second point. The third point is your supply chain management, which is super, super difficult. And that's where Greg's company can help you with, your quality control, what's your AQL level, the manufacturers that you're using, are they ISO certified? All these things that retailers are looking for, right? The fourth thing is actually really weird, but we've realized is packaging. Every retailer has different packaging requirements. In each pallet, they may only want 20 to 25 units. When you go to Walmart, they want 45 units. Just because the way that they display your product, maybe they're doing it on a Euro, which is hanging it in the store, or other ways is that they're putting it on a shelf. So you got to have the flexibility to offer different packaging requirements. And the fifth one I mentioned before, what other products do you have? Not just new products, but different price points, different colors, because they don't want to give you a shelf space with just one product. They want to show multiple products. So these are, if you have those 5 things in place, then you go through 4 steps. Crowdfunding is one very popular one. You have your own online store. You go through a boutique store, and then you go to a big box retail. If you have those things in place, you are more likely to become successful in those sales channels. Okay? with that, we'll leave the rest of the day for a little bit of networking. We have our panelists here, all our experts, so feel free to mingle. And thank you for joining us today. Thanks.